At 2:30 in the night, inside a $50 million Manhattan penthouse, millionaire Charles Whitmore stumbled upon something he never expected. His black janitor, Tiana Brooks, wasn't cleaning. She was sitting on the marble floor, studying a thick calculus textbook by flashlight. At that moment, what should have been a quiet night turned into the beginning of a storm. He thought she was just another worker. He thought she didn't belong. But what Charles didn't know was that this discovery would lead to his empire crumbling, and the world finally seeing the truth. For most people, working the night shift as a janitor meant going unnoticed. Sweeping floors, scrubbing bathrooms, polishing surfaces, then disappearing before the morning rush. For Tiana Brooks, 27 years old and carrying the quiet weight of her family's struggles, this routine was more than just a paycheck. It was survival. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, her younger sister was preparing for law school, and her brother still dreamed of becoming a doctor. Every dollar mattered. By day, Tiana blended into New York's endless stream of workers. By night, she moved silently through glass towers and luxury apartments, worlds that weren't hers, but worlds she cleaned with precision and care. One of those places was the $50 million Manhattan penthouse of millionaire Charles Whitmore, a man who rarely noticed the people who worked for him. To him, the staff were invisible, faces that appeared, cleaned, and disappeared without leaving a trace. But behind the quiet movements and worn uniform, Tiana carried something no one expected. An economics degree from Howard University and a mind sharper than the marble floors she polished. Rejected by Wall Street firms again and again, told she didn't fit the company culture, she found herself locked out of opportunities she had earned. So instead, she took the back door literally, entering the world of wealth as a cleaner, watching quietly from the shadows. What seemed like a job of invisibility was, in truth, a cover. And one late night, long after her shift should have ended, the thin beam of her flashlight illuminated more than just equations on a page. It lit the spark of a story that would unravel power, expose corruption, and force the world to question who really belongs at the top. The silence of the penthouse was shattered with Charles Whitmore's voice. He had stumbled into his living room at 2:30 a.m. and froze at the sight before him. His janitor, sitting cross-legged on the polished marble, a thick calculus textbook open, a faint beam from a cheap flashlight cutting through the dark. For a moment, Charles thought it was absurd. Then he was furious. To him, it wasn't just a worker out of place, it was an insult. Tiana closed her $10 calculator with the calmness of someone used to being underestimated. But her dignity only stoked his rage. To Charles, this wasn't just about a book. It was about hierarchy. He believed people like her had no right to sit on his floor, surrounded by symbols of his wealth, pretending to reach for something greater. He made that clear with sharp words that cut deeper than any order to clean. Words that told her to know her place. What Charles didn't see was the certainty in Tiana's eyes. She wasn't angry, she was deliberate. That night wasn't an accident. For months, she had moved like a shadow in his world, dusting around confidential contracts, overhearing calls filled with bribes and shady deals, noticing details that powerful men assumed no one paid attention to. Every misplaced folder, every careless whisper. She had documented it all. And now, dismissed in anger, she had exactly what she wanted. A clean exit, with no suspicion of what she carried out the door. The next morning, Tiana walked not into despair but into the Harlem Public Library. There, she spread out months of evidence. Photographs, notes, fraudulent contracts, organizing every piece with meticulous care. Her story was not just about survival anymore. It was about justice. Meanwhile, Charles reveled in his arrogance. At his country club on Long Island, surrounded by men who shared his contempt, he laughed over whiskey, mocking the scene. "Imagine," he told them, "a cleaning girl pretending to do calculus in my penthouse, like she could ever understand it." His friends roared with laughter. But someone else heard. A young black journalist, Darius Coleman, working part-time as a waiter, caught every word. For years, he had chased whispers of Whitmore's corruption but could never get close enough. And now, in one careless boast, Charles had exposed the thread. Within days, Darius found Tiana at the library. She didn't just hand him scraps of gossip. She opened a binder full of bribes disguised as consulting fees, fraudulent land deals, and secret communications with politicians. What Darius saw was explosive, but it wasn't just evidence. It was testimony from someone who had lived inside the lion's den, unseen, while gathering everything piece by piece. The kind of story that could break not only Charles but an entire circle of elites who thought themselves untouchable. And yet, as powerful as this evidence was, it carried enormous risk. If Whitmore or his allies discovered what Tiana had collected, her life, her family's stability, everything could collapse before justice was even possible. The question wasn't whether the truth was strong enough to destroy him. It was whether Tiana and Darius could survive long enough to bring it to light. The walls of power cracked on a Monday morning. Charles Whitmore awoke to the sound of phones ringing nonstop. Lawyers, bankers, officials all demanding answers. Confused, he stumbled into his study, only to see his face plastered across the front page of the New York Times. Bold letters screamed what he feared most. Millionaire mogul built $50 million empire on bribes and fraud. Every line of the article cut deeper than the last. Documents, contracts, photographs exposed for the world to see. His investors fled, accounts froze, and politicians who once answered his calls now refused to pick up. His empire wasn't slipping, it was collapsing in real time. And then the doorbell rang. Tiana Brooks stepped into the penthouse for the last time. No uniform, no cleaning cart, just a simple blazer and a briefcase. She placed the newspaper on his polished desk, her hands steady, her voice calm. In the very place where he once mocked her, she now stood as his equal, no, his reckoning. Charles stared at her, speechless, as she revealed the truth he had never considered. She wasn't just a janitor. She was an economics graduate, a strategist, someone who had understood every scheme he thought was invisible. The same woman he had ridiculed for studying calculus on his floor was now the reason his empire lay in ruins. For the first time in his life, Charles felt powerless. The man who had demanded obedience, who had dismissed her as invisible, now sat cornered in his own kingdom, watching it burn. And as Tiana turned to leave, she left behind not just a headline, but a lesson he could never escape. Underestimating her wasn't just arrogance. It was his downfall. Within weeks, the empire Charles Whitmore built on arrogance and corruption was gone. Courtrooms replaced country clubs. A prison jumpsuit replaced tailored suits. 15 years in federal prison became his reality. The same man who once sneered at Tiana for daring to study in his penthouse now had nothing left but regret and silence. But for Tiana Brooks, the story didn't end in loss. It bloomed into victory. With her name cleared and her brilliance finally recognized, she rose to become a senior financial analyst at a leading Wall Street firm. From an office window overlooking the skyline, she now worked in the same world that once locked its doors to her. Her mother retired at last, her sister entered law school, and her brother won scholarships to medical school. Darius Coleman, the journalist who believed in her, won a national award and used it to build a foundation for young voices silenced by inequality. Yet, beyond the headlines and accolades, the deeper impact was something larger. Tiana's story was a mirror, showing how prejudice blinds people to talent, how racism writes false limits on lives, and how power tries to confine those it underestimates. Charles thought he could define her place in society. Instead, she redefined him. And when she stood before hundreds of economics students, her words carried the weight of truth. Our place in society is not decided by prejudice. It is decided by how far we're willing to push, plan, and fight for justice. Her story is not just hers. It belongs to every voice that told it doesn't belong, every dream dismissed before it had a chance to grow. So the question remains, how many more talents will the world overlook before we finally start seeing people for who they are, and not just the boxes society tries to place them in? What do you think of Tiana's journey? From being dismissed as just a janitor to bringing down a millionaire's empire. Does her story remind you of how many voices are still overlooked today? If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that expose truth and inspire change.